I'm Charlene. It's been 3 years, but I can still vividly recall the day my world came crashing down. I was sitting across from Derek from HR and Victor from the corporate office, feeling like the walls were closing in. Derek slid a piece of paper across the desk, and there it was in bold. A 60% pay cut, effective immediately. My salary was dropping from $130,000 to a measly $52,000. I stared at the number, as if willing it to change. I felt my ears fill with a strange buzzing, and my heartbeat thundered in my chest. I didn't cry right then. Instead, I plastered on a smile, sounding like a robotic corporate drone as I asked for 24 hours to consider the offer. But inside, I was shattered. Once I got to my car, the dam broke. I sobbed uncontrollably, my mascara running down my face, and the windows fogged up. I sat there in the parking garage for what felt like an eternity, just breaking down. How could the company I'd dedicated 9 years of my life to suddenly decide I was worth so much less? Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm a single mom to a wonderful 11-year-old boy named Jake. His father, a free-spirited artist, decided that family life was too constraining and left us to pursue his dreams in a small town upstate. That left me as the sole breadwinner, and my job was not just a career, it was our lifeline. I started at Zenith Tech when it was a fledgling startup. There were only 25 of us in a converted old factory. It was the kind of place where everyone believed they were going to change the world. We had foosball tables, free coffee and snacks, and regular happy hours. It felt like a family. I was hired as a client manager. I worked my fingers to the bone, staying late at the office, coming in on weekends, and missing Jake's school events. I was determined to build something great, and I was good at it. In just 3 years, I was managing our top 10 accounts, which brought in over 70% of the company's revenue. I knew everything about my clients, their systems, their problems, their birthdays, and their kids' names. These were relationships I'd built with my blood, sweat, and tears. By the 5th year, I was promoted to director. I had a team of 9, equity in the company, and a salary that allowed me to pay the mortgage and Jake's asthma medications without having to make impossible choices. For the first time since the divorce, I could breathe easy. Then Celestial Enterprises bought us. I'll never forget the all-hands meeting. Our founder, Ethan, stood on a small stage in the cafeteria, telling us how this was an exciting new chapter and how Celestial's resources would help us expand. But something felt off. Ethan couldn't meet our eyes, and later I found out he'd pocketed $3.5 million in the acquisition and was fully vested. The rest of us were left with equity that was almost worthless, with 4 more years to vest under the new terms. The first 6 months after the acquisition weren't too bad. There were new email signatures, new procedures, and more meetings, but I still had my team, my clients, and my salary. But then, the redundancy assessments started. First, they came for the junior employees, then middle management. Every time there was a company-wide email about streamlining operations, someone's desk would be empty the next day. No goodbyes, just gone. I kept my head down and worked even harder. My team shrank from 9 to 3, but our client load didn't decrease. If anything, it got worse. I was working 75-hour weeks, answering emails at 2 a.m. and having panic attacks in the bathroom between meetings. Jake started asking me why I was always on my laptop, why I couldn't come to his baseball games, and why I looked so tired all the time. But I still thought I was safe. I was managing the relationships that brought in most of the revenue. They needed me. That's what I told myself until Derek from HR scheduled that fateful meeting. When I walked in and saw Victor from Celestial sitting there with his expensive suit and flashy watch, I should have known something was wrong. Victor told me they were realigning my compensation with market standards. It was like I was a commodity to them. Derek slid the paper with a new salary across the desk. They were taking away my clients, my authority, and most of my paycheck, but still expected me to do the same amount of work. They gave me until the next day to decide, knowing full well that I was a single mom with a mortgage and a child with medical needs. As I sat in my car, shaking, I got a call from Lily, an old colleague who'd left Zenith 6 months earlier. I almost didn't answer, but then I thought, why not? Maybe it was a chance to pretend for a few minutes that my life wasn't falling apart. Lily told me she was now at Novatech, Celestial's biggest competitor. Her boss had been asking about me a lot, and they needed someone with my client experience. I looked at the Zenith building through my windshield, thought about Victor and his arrogance, and about Ethan, who'd sold us out. I decided to take the chance. When I got home, I paid the babysitter and checked on Jake, who was already asleep. I'd missed his bedtime again. I spent an hour looking through my employment contract and found there was no non-compete clause. Zenith had been too small and idealistic when I joined to bother with such things, and Celestial hadn't gotten around to updating our contracts. At 9:30 p.m. I called Lily back. I told her about the 60% pay cut and the increased workload. She was angry and said she'd set up a meeting with her boss, Ryan, the CEO of Novatech, for the next morning. 20 minutes later, Ryan called me. His voice was warm and direct. He said they'd been trying to recruit me for the past 2 years, but my loyalty to Zenith had always won out. He offered me a position as Director of Strategic Partnerships, with a base salary of $165,000, a 25% annual bonus potential, and health benefits that would cover Jake's asthma medications. There were also stock options and a signing bonus if I could start within 2 weeks. I was shocked. This was $35,000 more than I'd been making at Zenith, and more than 3 times what Celestial was offering me. Ryan explained that they'd lost 8 major contracts to Zenith in the past 4 years, all accounts I'd managed. Their research showed that when clients worked with me, their retention rate was 94%, compared to an industry average of 71%. He said I was a competitive advantage that Celestial was too blind to recognize. Lily also told me a disturbing piece of news. They'd heard rumors that Celestial was planning to move all client services overseas within 8 months. They were using the pay cuts to push people out so they wouldn't have to pay severance. I realized that they weren't just cutting my pay, they were eliminating my job entirely. I told Ryan I needed to pick up Jake from school at 3 p.m., but I could come to Novatech right away to see the office. After a 3-hour visit, I walked back into the Zenith office, now Celestial's regional office, with a signed offer letter from Novatech in my bag. Victor and Derek were waiting for me in the conference room. I asked them some questions about the clients I managed, like who would handle the Starlight Systems implementation next month and the Orion Industries contract renewal in July. Victor waved me off, saying they distribute the responsibilities appropriately. I then asked if it was true they were moving client services overseas in 8 months. The color drained from Victor's face. He tried to dodge the question, but I knew the answer. I told them I quit, effective immediately. Victor tried to enforce the 2-week notice policy, but I knew my contract well. It stated that notice periods were equivalent to severance periods, and since Zenith had never offered more than 1 week of severance, that was all I was required to give. I also pointed out that in case of a compensation reduction exceeding 15%, all transition requirements were waived. I told them I'd accepted a position at Novatech. Victor threatened to review all my communications and client interactions and sue me if they found any hint of poaching or sharing proprietary information. I told him I hadn't taken anything that didn't belong to me, but the client relationships I'd built over 9 years were mine. My team, Alex, Sam, and Grace, knew I was leaving. They were worried about their own futures. I told them to check their emails in an hour. I packed up my desk quickly, putting family photos, a mug my team had given me as a joke, and Jake's emergency inhaler into a cardboard box. Security escorted me out, as if I was a threat. I made 3 important calls. First, to Ryan at Novatech, telling him I'd quit and that Celestial had taken it badly. He said they'd have legal ready. Second, to Ethan, my old boss. He sounded regretful, saying the acquisition hadn't gone as planned. I asked him to remind Celestial that they'd never implemented non-compete agreements because they believed in treating employees well. He said he'd call the CEO of Celestial, Mr.
Thompson.
My third call was to Lisa, the CTO at Starlight Systems, our biggest client. She was shocked to hear I was leaving and said they needed to move up the implementation timeline. She was frustrated that Celestial hadn't informed them of the changes. She asked for my new contact information at Novatech. When I picked Jake up from school, he immediately sensed something was different. I told him I'd left my job and that I'd found a new one that paid better and would give me more time with him. He was happy, saying he didn't like how they'd treated me. That night, Mr. Thompson called me. He said he'd received calls from clients expressing concern about my departure and that they might re-evaluate their vendor relationships. He asked if I was actively encouraging clients to follow me to Novatech. I told him I'd just informed them I was no longer with the company. He then offered to match Novatech's offer plus a retention bonus, but I refused. I told him it wasn't about the money. It was about respect and the 9 years of my life they dismissed. I asked him to treat the remaining employees better and to stop threatening to sue me. He finally agreed not to sue me and said he'd visit the regional office to see things for himself. 3 days later, I started at Novatech. I got a real office, and I was able to build my own team, which included Alex and Sam. Grace stayed at Celestial because her visa was tied to her employment there. 2 weeks later, Victor left Celestial, and Derek was transferred. A month later, Starlight Systems moved their business to Novatech. Then Orion Industries, followed by several other clients. By the 6-month mark, 5 of my former top 10 clients had moved to Novatech. It wasn't because I'd poached them. It was because of the relationships and trust I'd built over the years. Mr. Thompson kept his word. There was no lawsuit. Celestial restructured the regional office, abandoned the overseas transition plan, and adjusted salaries. But it was too little, too late for many of us. Now, 3 years later, I'm the Executive Vice President of Client Success at Novatech. I have a team of 22, make more money than I ever imagined, and I'm home for dinner with Jake almost every night. I haven't missed a single baseball game or school event. Sometimes I think about that meeting with Victor and Derek, that paper sliding across the desk. They thought they had all the power, but they were wrong. We all have power, and sometimes it takes being pushed to the breaking point to realize it. If you're in a job that doesn't value you, know that you have options, power, and worth. Sometimes, the best revenge is getting away and building something better for yourself.